Welcome to the Finding the Magic podcast, where books come alive. I'm Tricia Copeland, a fiction author and host of this show. If you love books, finding great reads, and hearing about the story behind the story directly from the authors, this is the place for you. Whether you like fantasy, science fiction, dystopian, or romance titles, I think you'll find something to love in my playlist. Listen in to discover something magical about a book or two today. Hi, Dan.
Hello, Tricia. It's nice to see you.
You too. Today we have vampire fiction author Dan Klefstad. He is the author of Fiona's Guardians, and I hear there's a prequel or sequel coming out too.
Combination prequel and sequel.
Oh, it's a prequel, and so it's the second of the series, but it's a prequel.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
There'll be going back, but also looking forward. So yeah, I'll take the story backwards and forwards.
Okay. And vampires are good for that because, they live forever, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Your vampires live forever?
Well, mine do. I love that trope. I love all the vampire tropes, and I try to incorporate as many of them as possible in this, just so people can recognize them, like little Easter eggs or something.
Oh, interesting. So you put different kinds of vampires in your book?
I do, especially in the next book. Yes, but for the first novel, Fiona's Guardians, I try to keep it recognizable. Garlic doesn't work. Crosses don't work. Silver is something that will immobilize them. Let's see what else. They burn when they are exposed to the sun. That sort of thing.
Okay. So set up the book and the characters for us then, and the world.
Well, Fiona's Guardians is about a 250-year-old vampire named Fiona, and she is a beautiful, powerful creature who hires humans to arrange for her blood supply. Fiona's rather innovative among her vampire family, and she would rather not have murder police showing up at her door during the daytime when she's asleep. So starting in the 1900s, she started hiring people. Initially, it was a big ex-shipbuilder who would subdue victims, bring them to her, and then take the body away. And then over the decades, this arrangement got much more sophisticated, especially after blood donation became a thing. And Fiona's current guardian, Daniel, has built up a vast network of hospital insiders who take a little bit of blood each, from here, there, and then they sell it to Daniel. He wants to keep it a business relationship, and then he supplies the blood back to her. Fiona needs 10 pints of human blood every night. Otherwise, she'll start to decay. And she prefers O negative. So Daniel has his work cut out for him, but they have a very close symbiotic relationship. He is her employee, but she's also realizes that she depends on him for protection during the daytime and also arranging that blood supply. He also invests her money so that they can afford this kind of network.
Interesting. So how did you come up with the 10 pints?
The 10 pints, I looked up, I did a little bit of research on just what the average human body holds. And I think it's something like 9 pints of blood. But I wanted to, give it, just round it up to 10. I like a round number like that. And so that also leaves the option of maybe a second victim if she needs it,
Okay. Right, because I thought that was around how much a human body would hold, but also, like, we drink water all the time. So blood is not the only liquid we have in our body, so that makes sense to me. And O negative, how did you come up with that one?
I don't have direct experience of the taste of O negative, but I wanted to give it just sounded nice, and it is because it's the universal donor. It goes with every other person who takes either A or O or whatever. It makes it a more in demand blood type, and so therefore I wanted to give her something that was more expensive to obtain.
Okay, interesting. So tell us the plot line of this book. Is her whole world just around Daniel and trying to stay hidden from the humans?
Right. The novel kind of goes very quickly to when Daniel started working for Fiona in the 1980s, but we do go back in time to when she had other guardians, including it to 1914. Then we go to the 1940s, and such. But the whole point of this is that while they're existing in the United States, she's in the business of surviving, is how she describes herself, and he working to make sure that she is able to survive. But while they're on the lookout for cops, they miss their gradual encirclement by an ancient order of a Vatican order of vampire hunters called Mors Strigae, or death to Striga, which is an early Latin word for vampire. And they announce they've been gone for a century since the last battle with Fiona and her family. But they reappear in this book, and they do so. Their first victim is Fiona's sire, a female vampire named Agrippina, and then this becomes a devastating blow to Fiona, and now we have the war renewed, if you will. But this time, the monks of Mors Strigae are using technology to find vampires. They're flying drones with thermal imagers, which can, spot a vampire who's 28 degrees Fahrenheit in my universe. So the drone and the operator on the ground can tell, oh, that's a human, that's a vampire. Where are they going? What's their home? And so they'll try to, set up an ambush on their home during the daytime. They also are using wood-tipped bullets, which you would need a really hardwood for that, so that the bullet doesn't disintegrate. And these, of course, take place of the wooden stake through the heart. A simple wooden bullet through the heart will do it. Although you have to be really good and really fast, because the vampires are very fast.
Fun. Yeah, this is giving me a little like Vampire Diaries as some of those same elements. They have wooden bullets. They get their blood from blood banks and steal them. There's many more vampires in that. So I'm assuming Fiona has other friend vampires.
So she has created a vampire named Soren Felenius. This was during World War II. He was a Nazi officer in Estonia during the war in the East, and she basically created him because she thought she could improve him from being how do I say this, a murderous human into a more sophisticated creature that kills intentionally, not just according to some ideology. And she also is part of I mentioned Agrippina. I actually have a time of what's it called, a family tree going back 2,000 years to the very first of this family who dresses like a Roman Empire, and his name is Caius Drusus, and he's a legal expert in the vampire laws. He's actually a magistrate called in quite to this novel at one point because Fiona is accused of a serious crime, and so we have a whole legal system that kind of rounds out, I think, this world building. In addition to the antagonist, Mors Strigae, this ancient order.
And so talk to me about the legal system, because I'm assuming this is a contemporary novel, correct?
It is. Although when you're talking about vampires, of course, it's you're always talking about the past as well. And these laws are ancient. They go back. But she doesn't play by the rules anymore. Her problem with her vampire family is that they're all stuck in the past. They've reluctantly tried to follow her lead by hiring human guardians, but it's not working out for them. They're kind of hidebound, and they just want to stick to the old ways. And Fiona, being the innovator, is trying to find a new way for them to survive, new ways, I should say. And one of them is, just constantly butting up against their legal system. And we'll get into more of that as well in the forthcoming sequel, which I hope to have out in the fall.
Okay, so the sequel is the prequel and looking forward and back, I think.
Yes, exactly. So I'll just call it a sequel because the next in the series. Yeah.
Right. Do you ever think you're going to introduce like synthetic blood and them using synthetic blood?
About that, I've encountered that in a couple of places. Obviously, True Blood, the TV series. It exists in another movie that I'm aware of, Daybreakers, I think, from 2009. So it's been done fairly recently, and so I wanted to give that a little time. So if you introduce a manufactured blood substitute that the vampires can live on, it does kind of make killing humans unnecessary. And even though I've said that Fiona hired guardians, to arrange for a blood supply, she's very much like a cat, and that she does like to go out at night to hunt. We get hints of this, and so it's almost like she just a part of her still misses hunting humans, although she has to be very discreet about it. And if there's a body, she might want to ask her humans to kind of clean up the mess.
So it's not against the rules to kill humans, according to the vampires then, right?
That's right. Although there may be an issue if one vampire kills another vampire's human guardian, so that could be an issue. But basically, the vampires do feel that they are on another level, a higher level of evolution than the humans, and so most of the vampires in my books view humans as dispensable. But for Fiona, they're essential. Especially the ones that she has chosen to be her guardians.
Right. And how do your vampires become vampires?
Oh, another trope that is widely used, I think. You have to, once you're feeding off of a human, typically what Fiona will do is take a nail and, slice her wrist as the human is dying. This is how she created her first, progeny, if you will. And so she drips some blood, into his mouth. So the blood has to come from the vampire to create a vampire.
Okay. And then this is a vampire. The human has to die and then is reborn a vampire, I'm assuming.
Correct. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I watch all the vampire things, so yeah.
Trope. I can see why filmmakers and authors continue to use it, because there's something very intimate about it, isn't it? Not just biting of the neck or anything, but if you're going to create another vampire, giving up an important part of yourself it makes it seem more like a gift.
Yeah. Right. And they have, usually the sire and the progeny, quote unquote, have some type of bond, right?
Yes. Because
a lot of times the progeny may feel either mad at the sire or either grateful, right? That they sort of been given this gift, I guess.
Exactly. Yes. So there, the transformation, the results of transformation, or even, let me say this, the whole experiential package of transformation is often rooted in trauma for the human, and so there's that. That's why vampires don't remember either the transformation process or their life beforehand in the universe I've created. Yeah, so that means that the newly created vampire really is dependent on their maker to give them a memory or a story, and also a name. In the second book that I've got, hopefully will come out soon, not naming your creation is considered to be a terrible, terrible thing.
So that was I had a question about the person who was a Nazi soldier. Did he become better, or can we know if he became better? Is that a spoiler?
She actually named him. She gave him his own name. She didn't really have to want to think about it too much. He's got his identifying information all over him. Soren Felenius, and a Hauptsturmführer, which is like a captain in the SS. And so she decided to keep his name. He's the only vampire in the first book that actually has a last name, which is interesting. All the others are named, Miklos, Caius, Constantine, Ferdinand, etc. Agrippina, who dies.
And And so is she able to reform him, or is this like a nature versus nurture type thing?
Right. He comes off as an entitled prick a lot of times, and he does not get along with Daniel, who is Fiona's main guardian when we get into the book, because frankly Daniel started out working for Soren Felenius first, and then he decided to jump ship and go to Fiona, and because Soren is Fiona's creation, he can't really be mad at her, but he's still very much resentful of Daniel for leaving. But Daniel did it for reasons because Soren was just a terrible boss. you know?
Yeah, a Nazi soldier might be a terrible boss.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And some of that cruelty, sadism does carry over into Soren's new life. And I don't explain too much why that is, but I just felt like I wanted some continuity for Soren, for this particular character, to have continuity between his current life as a vampire and this disturbing past that he had.
Yeah, it's very interesting because in most of the other vampire or shows or books I've read, a lot of the times the vampires are tortured by their prior lives or miss them or have like major regrets or something about now being a vampire. I mean, some people revel in it, or some vampires, but then some are very much like, oh, I had X, Y, Z. So that's interesting that you just have like the more like forward looking, I guess.
This dichotomy that you've kind of brought up, is very much a Louis versus Lestat kind of thing. Louis has regrets or has real conflicts about being a vampire, whereas Anne Rice's favorite creation, Lestat, he revels in it, as you said. He is the person, the vampire that really enjoys being a vampire for the most part, and so I like having continuing that trend. That tradition.
Well, it's interesting because I really see her book, Anne Rice's book, as kind of a Shakespearean tragedy. I don't know if you get that feel from Louis' story at all.
Tell me a little bit more. I never thought of it as a Shakespearean level tragedy, and perhaps that's because maybe I missed something. Tell me a little bit more about what elevates Louis' story to that of a Greek or Shakespearean tragedy.
Well, I guess just in the way that, like, in the end, he's never happy, and it's really his own fault, it seems like. So in that way, I see him as that Shakespearean character who can't get out of his own way. He could have been happy if he could have let go of some. I mean, yeah, it was tragic what happened to him, but are you going to make lemonade or vodka martini or something? So.
Brilliant. I like that. I'm overdue for a viewing of the film and a reading of the book. Actually, it's been a decade, I think, since I last read Interview with the Vampire. So now you've kind of prompted me into going back over some more.
I just did it like I listened to the audiobook like 6 months ago again. Just for that reason, I jumped back into Bram Stoker and all of those too. But so yeah, they're kind of, sometimes they get mixed up in my brain, but that's what I came away with the last time I listened to that one. So it's just,
A brilliant observation. I am. Yeah.
So talk to us. Well, don't tell us the ending, obviously, but is Fiona featured in this second prequel sequel?
We see a hint of this in the first book, what I'm about to say, but it really plays out in the second. It will play out in the second book, where Daniel and Fiona, when they're together, she's like a civilized creature who kind of can think ahead, weeks, months ahead in planning, and can exist in harmony with the world around her. When they're separated for whatever reason, Daniel and Fiona are not together. She kind of reverts a little bit back to a feral state. Her ability to plan goes away because Daniel was doing all of the planning for her, setting up, organizing her life, and so she has to kind of revert back back to hunting humans. And when a vampire, according to my thinking at least, when a vampire has to start doing that, you really can't think long term. It's suddenly, what am I? Who am I going to drink tonight? That sort of thing. And so we see that play out a little bit in the first book, but and during this time, Fiona finds a victim who she falls in love with, a woman named Camilla in London. And she creates Camilla during a very, I don't want to say erotic because that may imply a degree of consent. This was more of an assault, manipulation, the whole package. And so Camilla's creation is its own kind of story of confused, perhaps traumatic, doesn't remember, but she's not quite happy being where she is right now, or she's still trying to figure it out. She can't quite get there in terms of being a successful vampire. And so she approaches Daniel, Camilla does, and asks if he'll be her guardian and for a few years. And he signs up for 4. They have a handshake agreement, and Fiona allows this because by the end of the book, she achieves a certain degree of power, and she doesn't really need Daniel. But it pleases her enough that her progeny will be in good hands for a few years, and so that's how, more or less, how Fiona's Guardians ends, and the sequel really picks up where they are. So now Daniel and Camilla are back in the United States. They start out in Louisville, and very quickly they have a falling out, and he will abandon her, which is a crime, a high crime in the vampire world. And well, the story will progress from there.
So the Guardians sign up to these laws and rules too, then, right?
Yes, the Guardian becomes part. If you're part of their world, I guess it's kind of like the mafia, or
Yeah. If you know the secret, then you can't escape, right?
Right, exactly. You know too much. You know literally where all the bodies are buried. And again, abandoning a vampire that you have contracted with is a serious business. And so Fiona will become enraged and fly back from Rome, where she has based herself, and try to track Daniel down as well. So you've got 2 vampires now who are trying to track Daniel as he heads toward the equator, thinking that'll make him safe, or at least reasonably safe, for a little while. But then that's where the second story really will take off.
He better be very tech savvy, I have to say, right?
He'd better be. He's reasonably tech savvy. I think he's kind of like he has the wits of almost like a spy or an assassin, and that he's really good at stashing money, fake IDs, gold bars wherever, across the world, wherever he may need them. So he's clever enough to survive for a little while, even by his own admission. It's not going to be long.
Mm-hmm. Well, when we met the first time, I right away went and bought your book, and I have a vacation coming up. Well, not a vacation, a trip anyway, and I get to read your book. So I'm super excited, and I will be super excited to read the next one when it comes out too. Tell me how you got into vampire fiction.
I mean, I like many people who write or create films about vampires. I was exposed to Bela Lugosi on TV when I was a kid, and watching him in his fabulous cape, or coming out of the coffin, stepping out of the coffin. Later it was Christopher Lee, and then later after, I think it was I was in a senior in high school, or maybe a freshman in college, when I read Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire. And that really got me thinking about the emotional conflicts that are possible for a creature who is essentially a monster who lives, or who can live forever. That is kind of when the light bulb went went on, and I said, this is a really great way of telling a story about moral ambiguity, and what it's like to live forever. And so that's kind of when I started to look at the vampires differently. on the one hand, if you just take them as mythical creatures, they are exciting to read about because they're always portrayed as stronger than we humans are, sexier than we are, and they again just go on living unless something catastrophic happens, like a stake to the heart or something. But after reading Anne Rice, I began to think about vampires as metaphors, and it's not. And then I started reading more and watching more films. And the idea of the metaphor for something that drains our energy began to kind of develop. And it's not just a predator in the night stealing, climbing through your window or whatever. The vampire could be your neighbor. It could be a family member. It could be a government or corporate entity that's stealing your money a little bit at a time and prompting you to ask, why do I feel poorer this month? Something like that. And so or an employer like Fiona. And so I hope that at the end of reading my novel, Tricia, you might ask yourself, who's my vampire?
I love that feeling because, yeah, there's just some. Well, when I talk to people who are into vampires, I think everybody has the same fascination.
Mhm.
Did you ever think you would write a book?
Well, not a vampire novel initially. I was 16 when I wrote my first book, a 200-page spy novel, and it was terrible. It's really terrible. I was reading a lot of espionage kind of stories, and I continue to, and I like that world, another world filled with moral ambiguity and that kind of thing, and a lot of subterfuge themes. But yeah, eventually I did. I sort of dreamt up Fiona. Not one of those classic nightmares or anything, but it was during the day. I was kind of just half in and half out, and I was thinking about what it would be like to not only work with for a vampire, but to share space with them, live with them, and have conversations with them, because of course they've lived so much longer than we humans, and so they have more experience. And what would it be like for them to relate some of that experience and to hear that from them? So all these questions swirled around in my mind, and eventually I decided, I got to get this out of my brain onto a Word doc, and so I wrote a short story that introduced Fiona and Daniel to the world. It came out in February of 2017 in the literary magazine Crack the Spine. And the story was called The Caretaker. And this is where we introduce Fiona, Daniel, but also Soren Felenius. And the story is included in the novel. In fact, I wrote 12 stories based on these characters and eventually stitched them together, added more material, and eventually the novel came out first in 2020, then again in hardcover in 2022. So really it was a short story that started it all, and it helped me find my audience, because when the short story was published, I then sent it to book bloggers. Some of these book bloggers have, you may know, like features like Monday short story or whatever, and so they will occasionally review short stories. And several of the book bloggers that I pitched loved it. And so they encouraged me to write more about these characters. And so I wrote, yeah, as I said earlier, I think 12 stories that with these characters, and it made it a lot easier to finish writing the novel.
That's interesting. That's fun. Yes. So I was recently listening to Bram Stoker's Dracula and Dracul, which is the prequel that J.D. Barker and Dacre Stoker wrote. And then I wrote Powers of Darkness. Are you familiar with that one? It was the Icelandic version.
I have not read that one yet, but I've heard of it. Yes.
Yeah. So the interesting, and in each of these books now, there's like a history lesson basically
Mhm.
in Bram Stoker's, like how he wrote it, how all the different versions came to be, and why there are so many different versions, because he originally went to them and said, I want this in the paper. And the people in London were like, no, there's all these murders right now. People are going to be scared to death that this is real. We're not publishing it in the paper. He wanted it like a weekly thing. And then it got redacted and a publisher picked it up for the book. But because he didn't copyright it, and because the publishing world was what it was, he just kept sending his version to different places. And some people would put it in newspapers, some people would put it in books, and some people would just change it. So
Yeah.
like the Powers of Darkness, the Icelandic version, I think is the most close to Bram Stoker's, the one they published from the London version. But it does, there's an extra thing at the end that breaks with his first person account, like the diary style, that you can tell is by the different author. And this person did all this research on how you could tell if Bram really worked with this author to write it, or they wrote it together, or Bram, just said, yes, you can do it, do what you want. So yeah, it's really interesting, like how much research has been done on just this one author's work.
Oh gosh, yeah, and he left behind, Bram Stoker left behind just piles of notes about his own research, and so yeah, and all of those have been collected, and yeah, you could just plow through that, spend months, reading all those. Uh,
Right, talk about a lesson in copywriting, right?
yes, indeed, indeed. So,
Well, if we wanted to find your book, where can we find it?
well, of course, you can find it in all the online spaces, but if you're fortunate enough to have an independent bookstore in your neighborhood or anywhere within a half hour, I would encourage you to order it from them. And I'm a big supporter of not only small businesses, independently owned businesses, but bookstores especially. These usually are the pillars of the downtown community, and help make your local downtown a destination for people wanting a different kind of shopping experience. And so I would encourage you to order from them. If you don't have an independent bookstore near you, or it's not convenient for you to get out, you can take advantage of a resource called bookshop.org. Perhaps you've heard of it. This allows you to shop online and then name the independent bookstore that gets the profits, which is a really cool thing. And bookshop.org just recently announced that they were going to unveil ebooks purchases for this as well. So it's just a great way to support indie bookstores. And I make a point of co-branding with them. I mentioned this a little bit in another book that I wrote called DIY Book Promo, How to Find Readers Without Spending Money. I make a big point of co-branding with indie bookstores. And yes, I have an Amazon presence, but every day is Amazon Day. Maybe try to make this Saturday, your own personal independent bookstore day.
Awesome. And I think your website is danklefstad.com, correct?
That's right. Yes, and you will find a link to purchase my book on bookshop.org, and also a link to Amazon, whichever you prefer to use. So
great. And for our listeners, it's Dan, D-A-N, Klefstad, Klefstad. Everyone can find that. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you'll come back when you publish your next book so we can not get too many spoilers, but learn more about that one.
yeah. Well, Tricia, it's been great speaking with you today, and thank you for the invitation, and also thanks for the future invitation when my next book is complete. So,
thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Have a great day.
You too.